Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for watching our webinar today, which is looking at themes relating to suicide prevention in schools and looking at that whole school approach as well regarding this area. Thank you. In terms of today's webinar, the slides won't be sent out, but we will be sending out a recording. So if you at a later date want to watch this back, or you find it useful for the staff maybe in your school, this is available online. So yeah, please take a look at the recording at a later date. Thank you, Eleni. So in terms of who we've got joining us today, there's myself, Bethan Hall. I'm the 11 to 16 programme lead for Jigsaw. And in terms of my role, I have been heavily involved in the writing of the programme and essentially managing some of the content that's been within our programme and ensuring that our relationships with schools ensure that we're supporting schools and always meeting the needs as to both the students and the schools regarding PSHE. We also have Alice Newton-Leeman, who is the Director of Mental Health Learning. She has a lot of experience in this particular area today, including working with schools and people that work with young people in this area. And I'm sure when we move on to her presenting her section of today's webinar, she'll explain a little bit about her experience as well in this area. We then have Jim Cumpson, who's the CEO of Boys in Mind, and he will be delivering a section near the end of our webinar today about the work that Boys in Mind are doing in this space. We've worked with Jim for a number of years and had a great relationship with Jim and Boys in Mind over the past couple of years, because a lot of what we do at Jigsaw very much overlaps with what Jim is also trying to achieve in schools, putting young people at the heart of what he does as well. Thank you. Okay, so looking at today's session, initially we're going to be looking at what the RSHE guidance tells us about suicide prevention in schools. And we know with the 2026 guidance coming in action from September that there are some significant changes in this area that schools do need to be aware of. So we're going to start by looking at that, because we know schools have got questions surrounding this. And we also know there's a slight misinformation sometimes regarding this particular area. So we will be delving into that and directly pulling out information from the guidance itself. We'll then be moving on to looking at why this matters. So Alice will start by looking at sharing with us some of the research in this area. Jim is also going to be sharing some research in this area regarding specifically areas that he works in, but also the statistics that are relating to boys too. We'll then move on to how can suicide prevention be addressed in schools? What are the considerations and what is good practice, which Alice will be talking us through, a general approach in this area. I will also be sharing, for those of you that have got are using the Jigsaw programs, I will be sharing what this looks like in the Jigsaw program as well, and how there's definitely a lot of overlap there regarding this. And then we'll be moving on to sharing the work of Boys in Mind. So Jim's going to be giving some examples of the work that he does in this area and how that's created an impact specifically as well. And then near the end of today's session, if you do have any questions, please pop those in the chat. We will address those near the end of today's session, but please, if you could leave those till near the end of the session, just in case your question is answered, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so regarding what today's webinar is, I wanted to start with this because I want to make it clear to maybe, if you may be a PSHE lead today that just wants to come and find out a little bit more about the guidance in this area, but we also know that the guidance clearly states that before teachers can teach suicide directly in school, they must have they must consult mental health professionals and put in place high quality evidence-based staff training. This has come from the DfE guidance. So this session today is going to do the following. So initially we're going to clarify what the DfE expectations are regarding suicide prevention in schools. It's going to raise awareness on the research in this area, and then also provide opportunity to understand good practice in this particular area. Now, what today's webinar isn't going to do is essentially, I know for some of you to be able to teach this topic, you need to have that, what we call evidence-based staff training. This isn't that necessarily. So we would anticipate for you to achieve that First of all, it needs to have some face-to-face contact, or at least an opportunity for teachers to develop skills and knowledge in this area, but skills in particular, and to maybe develop those is really important. So we're not going to be providing that level of detail and the skill development necessarily required for teachers to teach about suicide explicitly in their schools. But what today's session is really doing is raising the awareness and also clarifying what you need to do if this is something you would like to introduce to your school curriculum. Now, we do know that the PSHE Association have had conversations with the DfE recently, because this particular area of the guidance, whilst it states that schools need to have expert-led training to teach this topic, doesn't necessarily highlight what is expert-led training or signpost particular organisations that maybe would be reliable. So that is something to really consider when you're questioning is what is quality expert-led training. And I think if, in terms of looking at today's webinar, if it aligns with an awful lot of what we're looking at today, then we can suggest that you're probably heading in the right direction. Thank you. So the DfE guidance states that secondary schools may also choose to teach about issues which are not listed in the secondary curriculum content. So I've highlighted in bold there they may also choose, which makes it very clear that this is a choice for schools. It is optional. And these are the three areas that they've highlighted: so suicide prevention, self-harm and eating disorders. Now, before schools move on to delivering this content, first of all, they need to make sure that the materials they're delivering are of high quality and are written by specialists also. They need to ensure that the training is high quality evidence-based staff training. So that must be in place before staff are teaching this content. Staff must also be prepared for disclosures, and they will be need some training in this area. So they need to be properly equipped to lead discussions and manage disclosures. Should a disclosure happen either during the lesson or following the lesson as well. And the safeguarding procedures and pathways in place must be very clear regarding this. And then consult professionals. So language and the content needs to be accurate, straightforward and appropriate. And Alice is going to talk today a little bit about what you should expect to see and what you should avoid, particularly within sessions. Thank you. Now, I've just, so that you can see this yourself, so there's no misinterpretation. This is what paragraphs 43 to 47 says in this area. So for paragraph 43 states that secondary schools should also consider how to safely address suicide prevention, and many aspects are addressed through the mental well-being curriculum. So from primary, recognising emotions, looking after well-being, help seeking, isolation, loneliness, bullying and how to cope when things go wrong. So the way I've interpreted this is essentially what the DfE is saying, that is even though you might not have a lesson within your curriculum which looks explicitly at suicide as a topic, you can address suicide prevention in other ways, and they've listed some ways here that they would expect to see within a PSHE or RSHE curriculum. Paragraph 44 states that schools should consult mental health professionals and put in place high quality evidence-based staff training before addressing suicide directly, which I've mentioned previously. And teachers must not discuss instructions or methods and must avoid emotive language, videos or images that could signpost pupils towards dangerous ideas. And I know Alice is going to be discussing that with you a bit later on. And then paragraph 45, schools should consider carefully when it is suitable to deliver suicide prevention content, taking into account the age, maturity and personal experiences of pupils, views of parents and the confidence and skills of teachers, recognising that maturity increases across the early secondary years. So that's again making sure that you're considering the age and stage appropriateness of the content that you're going to be utilising. And then if teachers have concerns about specific pupil relating to self-harm or suicidal ideation, or a pupil discloses information, they must follow safeguarding procedures. So I understand that when we're going to be talking today about why this is a really important area that we need to address with our young people. But it's also very important that your teachers are ready, your teachers are equipped, and you have everything in place if you are choosing to do this route and talk about suicide, explicitly as well. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to pass on now because we're going to look a little bit later on at the primary themes, and I'm going to pass on to Alice now, who's going to look at some of the good practice in this area and why we're looking at this today as well.
Okay, thank you, Bethan. And yeah, hello everyone. So my name's Alice Newton-Leeming, and I work for Mental Health Learning. And absolutely, yes, that is what we're going to be diving into now. So yeah, I really just, love how clear Bethan has made how important it is that we have a really clear understanding, of exactly what it is, we can be looking to discuss with pupils, but also so important that actually whoever's going to do that and other staff within the school are prepared for disclosures from students and pupils who are having thoughts of suicide, so that they feel ready, willing, and able to respond to those needs. So yeah, research does obviously indicate that talking openly and responsibly about suicide lets obviously a person, who is potentially having thoughts of suicide know that they don't have to be alone, that there are people who want to listen and who want to help. So that is really important. But yes, we need to think about how we do that in a safe and sensitive way. Okay. So yeah, just a little bit about me before I sort of kick us off, really. So yeah, as I said, my name's Alice. I've been working within the field of suicide prevention now for, I think it's about sort of 15, 16 years or so, that I've been delivering training around suicide prevention and self-harm. And I've got a background of working on a number of different helplines, such as Papyrus's Hopeline 24/7, Samaritans, Listening Ear, who provide a suicide bereavement service, and also Childline as well, supporting parents. I have a lot of experience, yes, of going into schools, delivering sessions with young people, or through other, things, other programs, if you will, like NCS, for example, and yes, training teachers in suicide prevention. So yeah, that's just a bit about my background, and I'm also training to be a counsellor as well alongside my training delivery. So, I won't kind of, reinforce, sort of what we're going to be focusing on. We've already kind of, covered that. What I do want to give you is an example of the training that you can access. Now, this doesn't come from the Department of Education. Okay, so this is the training that I, as a professional in this area, would recommend that you access. And that's not because I'm the only one delivering it. These are courses that have been developed actually by a Canadian organisation called Living Works Education. They are evidence-based. They've been going for many, many years. They are updated over the years based on the most up-to-date research and evidence base, and they are offered by plenty of organisations across the UK and wider if you happen upon this webinar and you're in a different country. So I really would encourage you to check them out. These are interactive courses that really will give you the skills. There are lots of courses out there, and I think if you haven't already been bombarded with offers, from providers, to be really careful about what you choose to invest in, because obviously budgets are tight, and you want to make sure that the training does do what it says it will, which is provide, your teachers, your staff with the confidence, and the feeling of being prepared for that disclosure of thoughts of suicide, knowing what to do and how to respond to that with the child's needs at the forefront of everything that you are doing. You'll notice I've put some suggested roles next to these. So Assist is a 2-day course. It's very in depth. It's very interactive. It will teach you a six-stage model from identifying someone with thoughts of suicide through to safety planning with them. And then Safe Talk is a shorter course, around 4 hours, that really hones in on becoming alert to the signs that we can be aware of, asking someone if they're thinking about suicide, and then connecting them to someone who is trained in something like Assist who can do that safety planning piece. So the roles are there as an example of, if you were to invest in both, what this might look like within your school setting. We need lots and lots of people alert to those signs, and then we need kind of like a few people trained in the safety planning aspect. And so this model, if you will, sort of aims to follow your natural pathways of supporting a pupil with thoughts of suicide. So I won't go on about those too much longer because you can Google them, find out lots of information. You can reach out to me if you want to talk about any of those further. I have also mentioned as well that in some areas, these courses, they're well known, and a lot of organizations, a lot of local authorities are already funding them. So just depending on where you are, just see if you can find out if there are any funded places, because there may well be in your area. Okay. But yeah, our message really is do your research and really invest in the best, and make sure that, what you're investing in is going to do what it says it will. Okay. So let's talk about then why you're actually, here, why you're interested in this, why this is important. I just want to give you some statistics, and I guess I want to be mindful of encouraging you to just take care of yourself. When we hear statistics relating to suicides, that can be difficult to receive. So just take care of yourself. If you're watching this on record, then maybe pause every now and again, and just kind of, do what you need to do to look after you. So in 2024, these are the most recent statistics that we have, as it takes some time for the Office of National Statistics to collate the data. There were 7,147 reported suicides, and there are an estimated 200 school-aged children dying by suicide each year, which is, roughly the size of a small primary school. And these statistics, they are hard to be aware of. We refer to them as reported suicides because not every person who dies by suicide will be concluded as a death by suicide by the coroner. So sadly, the number of people we are losing to suicide is likely higher than what is actually released to the general public. And this also doesn't include children under the age of 10 as well, which I appreciate may sound shocking that children under the age of 10 can die by suicide. And whilst it is rare, it can, and it does happen. And we do know of children as young as 5 to have died by suicide. What we tend to find is that, many adults tend to underestimate a child's capacity to think about suicide, and also their ability to act on those thoughts. And even though a child as young as 5 may not know the word or understand the word suicide, and they can believe different things about what could happen when a person dies, they can still understand the idea of making oneself be dead or killing oneself. And so I'm sharing this information with you so that, to try and kind of perhaps, diminish any myths around, sort of at what age a child, is capable of thinking about or acting on thoughts of suicide. And encourage you to be aware of that, just in case we do have any, educational staff here watching who work in younger settings, or indeed you may have contact with children in your personal lives as well who are younger. And it's just knowing to also be alert within all age groups, basically. So really, what we're talking about here, one of the reasons why this is entering the option as being part of the PSHE curriculum is because we know that introducing information from an early age around mental health and well-being and coping skills and support, and knowing where a young person can go to access support when things are getting too difficult to the point of having thoughts of suicide, means that we will increase that help-seeking behavior and reduce young people from acting on thoughts of suicide or developing thoughts of suicide altogether if we're doing that preventative work around increasing a young person's well-being, supporting them with their resilience and coping skills and all of those things. And the earlier we start those discussions around well-being, the better, so that young people can be armed with those tools they need to manage life's ups and downs. And I'm sure you probably know that as well-being and mental health has been part of the PSHE curriculum for a little while now. So I'm going to talk through then, what kind of content should be covered, and who should be receiving the suicide prevention lessons if you are to start delivering those, once you've had that training, of course. Just who, which age groups, which year groups, and so on. Just to really clarify, I guess that. So, just it's quite a blanket statement here, really, for Key Stage 1 and also Key Stage 2 as well. That the offer of general suicide awareness sessions should not be made for this age group. Okay, for these age groups, really, the focus needs to be on mental health and well-being, because this age group just don't have abstract thinking at this point, and they will find, general suicide awareness information really quite difficult to understand. So that's just a rule for Key Stage 1. Now, if we talk about Key Stage 2, years 4 to 6, again, we are the DFA Department of Education is not recommending, again, general suicide awareness talks to this age group. Okay. Now, although this isn't in the guidelines as such, what the evidence tells us is that if there has been a suicide of a pupil at the school, then it is okay to talk with the young people about what has happened. So I've kind of put here, suicide awareness talk should only be delivered in response to a suicide or attempted suicide. But maybe I should rephrase talks, because we're not sort of delivering a lesson as such. Really, it's about, creating a safe space, isn't it, for those young people to talk about what this experience feels like for them, and just having that openness around, what that feels like and where they can access support. So it's about enabling them to process and express their feelings. Okay, it's a discussion rather than a talk at them. Okay, and the emphasis being on those small classroom size groups, even smaller, if you can, would be better. Okay. We want to obviously, look to involve them in helping them with any kind of challenges they are facing around that, and just building those skills to problem solve. Looking at, supporting them to recognize, who is in their support network and how can they access any certain resources if they need those in order to cope with what has happened. But at this point, we're not providing those general suicide awareness sessions, because what we don't want to do is kind of send a message around suicide perhaps being normalized or sensationalized. We're treading a really fine balance here around reducing the stigma around suicide, and yes, having those conversations about it, and so that we can increase help-seeking behaviour for children who experience those feelings. But what we don't want to do is talk about suicide as if that is the inevitable, okay, for those who experience difficult things in life. So yes, we want to acknowledge the feelings that those young people left behind are having. So, the sadness, the pain that they are experiencing, and also the sadness and the pain that the young person who has been lost has gone through as well. And yes, a recognition that their death by suicide is a tragedy, but for the bereaved pupils to know that the vast majority of young people who struggle with thoughts of suicide do survive these thoughts. And so if they were to ever have thoughts of suicide, because we know losing somebody can increase the risk of those who have lost that person, who are bereaved, there is help. And this is where they can access it from. Okay. So I'm not going to talk too much more about supporting those who are bereaved by suicide. There is lots of guidance also available. Again, you're welcome to contact me if you want to talk about that in more detail. My main message would be that as much as we would obviously hope to never have to go through losing a young person to suicide within a school setting, if you don't have a plan to respond to that, please develop one. Okay. Please have that plan. And I hope you never have to use it. But having that plan of knowing who's going to do what and how and when and so on is so, so important. Because if you do experience that tragedy, then responding to it will feel slightly easier. Okay, so let's move on then to Key Stage 3, 4, and 5, so years 7 to 13. So the guidance is saying, yes, we can deliver general suicide awareness and prevention lessons to this age group, but there are some really specific criteria that the lessons need to meet. So we've touched on a few of those already, and I'm going to reiterate some of those now. So it's really important that the lesson, is part of a program. So obviously, as part of your curriculum, your PSHE curriculum, you're already delivering lessons, which include, awareness around mental health. And so this lesson needs to feel part of that. It's really important that it doesn't just feel like this sort of random one-off session that you're kind of just delivering once a year. Okay. Yes, it needs to be delivered either once a year or twice a year. And yes, it needs to be delivered by trained RSHE or PSHE teachers or trained external facilitators. So important that, when you start to think about, what this lesson is going to look like, that the person delivering it knows how to do so in a safe and sensitive way, providing appropriate content, using appropriate language, and ready to respond to disclosures if they should happen. This is also important as well in that, being part of that wider program of lessons relating to mental health and well-being, that program delivery, is staggered over a period of time. So it's not that the young people are perhaps going to one full day relating to mental health, well-being, self-harm, eating disorders, and suicide, and that is their just entire day all at once. It really needs to be staggered. Yeah. And also, pupils need to know that they're attending a lesson in advance about suicide prevention, and it should not be made mandatory. Incredibly important that they know what they're going to go to and they are given permission to not attend, okay, if they don't want to go to it. And also know that if they decide to go to it and decide partway through they don't want to stay, then that is okay as well. And so it's really advisable as well that the lesson is delivered not just by one person but two, so that support can be offered to any pupils who do decide to leave partway through, and that there is a safe space for them to go and talk with somebody if they should want to. So the content for these key stages should include, or can include anyway. So mental health awareness, what it is, what mental well-being is, and how to take care of it, and so on. It can obviously include things like self-care, and then specifically relating to suicide, how to spot signs of concern. Okay, so we can provide pupils or interactively encourage them to think about what kinds of things might they notice among their friends, among their peers, that might make them feel concerned about that person. What might that look like? What might they see in someone's behavior? Or what might someone say, whether that's verbally or on social media, for example? What might they become aware of that is happening for that person in their life? And what might they just get a sense of about the person? Maybe it's just a change in that person's general mood or overall demeanor. So what can they be alert to in order to spot those signs of concerns? And then, what are they going to do with that? So what are the sources of support within the school? what are pupils aware of? So we want to really reinforce, actually who can support that person, how can they connect that person to those sources of support, as well as accessing it themselves. Any external resources as well, helpline numbers, other charities, third sector organisations, and so on. And yeah, and then reinforcing, well, what to do, how can they actually connect that person to a teacher or other member of staff, or who would they go to let them know that they felt worried about somebody because of what they had noticed. Now, in terms of what the content should not include, so Bethan's touched a little bit on this already, but I'm just going to include a couple of other things. So I've shared with you the prevalence of young suicide. I've shared with you some statistics and some data, but young people do not need to know that. They don't need to know, okay, how many people are dying by suicide. They don't need to know that suicide is the leading cause of death. And under young people, we need to know that because that's why we know that this is a really important thing for us to be doing. But young people don't need to be aware of that. They really should not be told any details of methods and means. Okay, that's incredibly important. We don't need to discuss methods or means of suicide. We know that for vulnerable young people thinking about suicide, this could give them dangerous ideas. Okay. We don't want to share any content which glamorizes or sensationalizes suicide. So, for example, we probably likely know of celebrities who have died by suicide, okay? But we're not going to be giving examples of celebrities who have died by suicide, and we don't need to sensationalize, for example, sharing how many people attended a funeral of a person who died by suicide. If young people who are vulnerable and thinking about suicide become aware of, perhaps the hundreds of people that, flock to someone's funeral, then it can, make a young person even more vulnerable who perhaps feels unloved and uncared for, if they think that people will care if they were to end their life. Any other facts and figures which normalize suicide, again, also don't need to be shared. And we also don't need to cover contributing factors as well, which include everyday concerns. Yeah, because what we're doing here is, it feeds into that idea that, suicide is perhaps a natural thought to have for a young person if they are struggling with everyday concerns. Yes, that can happen, but what we want to instead focus on is actually the support that young people can access for these kinds of concerns instead. Okay. So just thinking about, sort of what this might look like then in practice. Incredibly important that, we are looking to, yes, address the whole year group. So if you're going to do this, within certain year groups, speak to them in those classroom-sized groups, those smaller groups, but speak to them all on the same day. Because what we want to avoid is, for, children to have a lesson about suicide prevention and then go immediately to their friends on the playground and tell them what happened and what's been covered. Because likely, messages will become mixed, and that could cause confusion and worry and panic for those who aren't receiving a full understanding of the way that the session is delivered with care and sensitivity. So really important that everybody gets it all at the same time per year group, okay, but not in an assembly style lesson. Parents and carers also need to be aware of the lesson in advance, so I'm going to share a link to a template that you can use when you're thinking about, how you would communicate with parents and carers to let them know that their child is going to receive this lesson. Obviously, the content, needs to be evidence-based, factual information. as I said earlier, we're going to include signs of concern and what to do. That is really the main bulk of what the lesson should look like, what the signs might look like, and what to do if you feel concerned. Some of the older ages, and again, you're going to take into consideration the maturity of the pupils and their experiences. For young people sort of over the age of 15, yes, you could talk to them also about what it might feel like to ask a young person that they're concerned about, ask a friend or a peer if they are thinking about suicide, and letting them know that it would be okay to ask that. But if the answer is yes, knowing that actually that, is really important for them to not take that on themselves and to share it with a trusted adult. That is an incredibly important message to also send through as well. There are, videos that have been created. So Grassroots, for example, have produced some fantastic resources to use, such as videos which provide examples of concerns, again, to kind of, sort of support pupils with their understanding of what kinds of things might alert them to another person struggling. Obviously, again, being mindful of language, so avoiding language such as committing suicide or completing suicide, things like successful suicides or unsuccessful suicide attempts is all language that we really want to avoid using. And obviously, just creating that safe and supportive environment as well. So creating, sort of group agreements at the start and exploring and discussing with the pupils about what a safe and supportive environment would look like and how can we make this feel as comfortable as possible for them. And then, yes, of course, sharing services that can help. And also obviously within the school as well, reiterating it, as much as we can, who is available within the school alongside those who are delivering the lesson as well, if they are also members of staff. So yeah, I've got a link here, just that you can access to have a little look at a kind of template to send home to letters to parents and carers, just to let them know, about the new guidance and yeah, and the changes and so on. So yeah, just going back to that creation of a supportive environment, then I've covered a little bit of this already, so I might skim over this quickly. Ground rules I mentioned, group agreement, permission to pupils to leave if needed. Yeah, just, really important communication skills, such as being open and honest and non-judgmental and compassionate. Encouraging pupils to ask questions as well, should really be invited. So, like I said, this isn't a talk that we want to just kind of teach at them. Involve them, let them know that this is a safe learning environment, and obviously you've got your group agreement in place that might cover, perhaps, what might be okay for us to share, and perhaps what might we avoid sharing, what might be difficult for others to hear, and so on. And I mentioned earlier about two members of staff to be able to manage disclosures as well. Because naturally, if we are going to start talking about suicide more, you're probably going to receive more disclosures. That's not because you've put the idea of suicide into pupils' heads where it wasn't there already. So we know from all the research and the evidence base that that is not possible to do. We can't plant seeds. The pupils you are teaching likely know about suicide already. They already know that it's an option, and you are not going to encourage it by delivering open and sensitive conversations and discussions and lessons around suicide. But what you are sending a message of is, we're prepared to talk about this, and so help seeking behaviour will likely increase. You may get indirect disclosures, okay? So, indirect disclosures are an invitation to you to ask that person about suicide. It could be, a pupil saying they don't want to be here anymore. They want to give up on life. Life feels pointless. Or it could be behavioural changes that you notice. Or it could be, yes, a direct disclosure within the classroom. And that might feel, quite difficult, but again, it's a good thing. Okay, that pupil has felt able to share that because you have created a safe and supportive environment. And so then, you can respond to that by following the training that you would have had prior to the lesson. So just reminding yourself, if that were to happen, that this moment the pupil is safe, they're in school, there's no need to panic, there's no need to alert any kind of alarm system as such or to rush the pupil to A&E. Actually, what we are doing at this moment in time is responding to them in a really calm and confident manner. So again, this is why it's really important to do those lessons in two or more staff so that you've got an extra staff member on hand to respond to disclosures. And we would want to thank the pupil for sharing this and ask if they want to speak further about their thoughts of suicide either immediately or at the end of the lesson because they are safe, they are not imminently at risk. And so it's important to give them choice. Do they want to continue with the rest of the lesson, or would they like to go somewhere else and talk about what it is that they've shared? But obviously, we don't want to leave it any later than that. Okay, so what isn't an option is for the pupil then to leave that lesson and go somewhere else. Okay, and they definitely should not go home without having spoken to a member of staff. And I'm sure you know this from your safeguarding experience. Okay. And there's a bit of signposting that we can do there as well. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to give you a bit of a sample structure. I'm going to get the whole thing up here as to just what this could look like, if you were kind of, thinking about, wonder where this might fit in with the existing PSHE curriculum that you've got. And I'm just going to kind of hone in on, subject 3, which is where you would talk about suicide. And again, just reinforcing that we don't need to overcomplicate these sessions more than they might already feel, as something new to introduce into your curriculum. You're really just honing in on what you might recognize in terms of those signs of distress in your friends, in your peers, what to do if you feel concerned, and who can help. Okay. And I won't kind of go into the others. Okay. Here's a sample of what that lesson could look like. Okay. So you might start, with a bit of a check-in, just encouraging pupils to, kind of, be in that present moment, explore what's going on for them, and if they feel happy to do so, to express, where they're at, some of them might feel positive about being there, some of them might feel terrified because they don't know necessarily what's coming. So just to check in with themselves really and to let them know what the purpose of today is. You might want to do a bit of a grounding exercise, if that's helpful, depending on again what's been shared from the check-in. You might do a bit of an icebreaker, okay? Then you're going in with spotting the signs, so you could do this, within groups, it might be looking at some fictional descriptions of a character and inviting them to look at, what's going on for this person in terms of their behavior, their verbal cues, what they're saying, what are they doing, what do you feel, is a concern. And again, depending on the age and the maturity and experience of the pupils in the room, for pupils to perhaps know that it's okay to ask about suicide clearly and directly, perhaps some discussion about what that might look like and exploring, keeping this open, exploring their worries, any concerns that they've got about doing so, alleviating any fears that they might have about planting seeds and so on, whatever they bring to it really. And then how do we respond and who can help? So again, reinforcing the importance of knowing who the trusted adults are in their life, who can help perhaps outside of the school as well as internally, and also exploring any worries they might have about sharing that information as well. What we tend to find is that, young people do tell about a third of young people do tell other people that they're having thoughts of suicide. It's just that those other people tend to be their friends who don't always know what to do with that. And then we can end the lesson the same way by checking out perhaps another grounding exercise and encouragement of self-care. So there's just some additional resources just up on the screen there. So you can always pause here and then come back to those. And the same just with regards to some support available for you as well as your pupils as well. And then just another reiteration of the training that is available that I really, really would encourage you to take a look at. Even if you're not planning on introducing these lessons, it's still a good idea to take some suicide prevention training if you haven't already. And I'm going to finish there. Yeah, you're very welcome to reach out and contact me if you want to discuss any of the points that I've raised in today's webinar. Okay. Oh, Bethan, you're muted.
Thank you. That was really helpful, Alice. Thank you. Even from somebody that works at Jigsaw and has worked in this area, there's a lot of really useful information there. I think, in terms of the message that I really got from that there is support out there for schools in this area. There are things that need to be considered before you dive into teaching a lesson of this nature explicitly. But if you do feel that's appropriate for your school, then certainly please do reach out to individuals like Alice. So in terms of we've looked at, Alice has talked about, generally speaking, how you could embed themes that are suicide prevention within your curriculum. At Jigsaw, we do not have a lesson that looks specifically at suicide. We do still address suicide prevention, referring back to that paragraph 43 where the DfE have highlighted areas that you can be talking about that will feed into this suicide prevention approach. These are again listed, some of the areas that the DfE have highlighted, and within our primary scheme, this is how we have approached this at Jigsaw. So I'm not going to go delve into each of these, but essentially the message that I want to give is that if you are a Jigsaw school delivering the programmes, you are still approaching this area and you are still supporting your students and children with all of these themes listed here in an age and stage appropriate way. We don't, in terms of the guidance we've talked about today, if we were to talk about suicide, or if schools choose to, generally speaking, we'd anticipate it would be a secondary level that the DfE is really pointing towards here as well. Thank you. And then, as you can see here, secondary wise, and again, I'm not going to go too much into the full detail, but as you can see here, we build on these in an age and stage appropriate way. And all of these are areas that are woven throughout all age groups in both the primary and secondary themes that are really there to support our children and young people. Thank you. Okay. So some teachers might want to see, where is this more explicitly talked about? So in our Healthy Me unit, we do have lessons that are a little bit more focused on mental well-being, with safe messaging applied as well. Again, these aren't explicit lessons on suicide, but they do, I suppose, lean more towards areas that are going to be specifically needed for suicide prevention. So I've got some examples here. Of course, there are many more than this, but these are 3 particular examples from year 9 through to year 11 that you can find within Healthy Me. I'm not going to again go into each of these, but as you can see, there are themes such as mental health illness and stigma, themes such as belonging, loneliness and inclusion, self-care, where to find that mental health care support, looking at substance use and mental health, and then also looking at mental well-being itself, so themes such as nutrition, sleep, stress, anxiety, and also self-worth and identity, and how to cope when things go wrong. And we do this in a really interactive way, and we also embed a lot of these themes even in a really subtle way as well within other topics too. Thank you. Now, whilst I have mentioned we don't have a lesson on suicide, it is very important to note that the DfE also has listed this within the wellbeing online section of the secondary RSHE outcomes. So it states that the serious risks of viewing online content that promotes self-harm, suicide or violence, including how to safely report this material and how to access support after viewing it. This must be covered within your RSHE curriculum. So it is a statutory requirement to address this. So it's not necessarily saying you need to address suicide, but it is saying that you need to address, if a young, address what young people can do and what support is available should they view something online, such as suicide, or self-harm, and need support with that. So we have on the right here listed, and again, year 7, that's age 11 plus, and age 12 plus, for example. We don't necessarily talk about that specifically, but we do build up the skills, and it is a stepping stone towards our year 10 lesson, which does look at this in a little bit more detail. So it does name, for example, suicide in terms of viewing online materials. And our year 9 lesson, which is found in Dreams and Goals unit, piece 5, also looks at the relationship between AI chatbots and suicide. But again, this isn't a lesson on this. It is very subtly woven into that lesson, for example, as a scenario. Thank you. So in terms of next step to consider as a PSHE lead, again, just to remind you, this is a choice. It isn't a, we have had a few emails in come from schools when the DfE guidance was what came out initially. So in the September, we did have a couple of emails of schools essentially asking where is your suicide content, and also, worrying about inspectors coming in and asking for that particular content. This is a choice for schools. It isn't a case that you have to today go away and deliver a lesson on suicide. We have provided you with the support if you choose to do so today, and the information you might need to take on board. And if that is the case, things you might want to consider is initially audit your PSHE programme. So even if you're not considering doing a suicide lesson explicitly, consider how your programme still addresses suicide prevention inexplicitly. Consider safeguarding alignment. If you do choose to deliver suicide, it's important that you're consulting your governors and also that you're considering parental engagement. What we don't want is a young person going home and, parents aren't aware these conversations are happening in school, for example. And then staff CPD prior to delivery. I feel like we've made that message very clear today that needs to be in place, and the level of CPD as well needs to be considered also. So that is it from me. I'm now going to pass you over. Eleni is doing a few changing the slides today, so we'll just bear with her a moment. But I'm going to pass you over to Jim, and Jim is the CEO of Boys in Mind, and he's going to talk to you about essentially what his charity does and the impact that the Boys in Mind have in this particular space. So we'll just give it a few more minutes.
Thank you, Bethan, and thank you, Alice. Well, as always, I am always impressed by these sort of webinars because I'm always learning new things as well. So thank you. Brilliant. Just to say, my name's Jim Compson, and as I said, I'm CEO of Boys in Mind. Just before I start talking a bit about my background, I taught for 25 years, primary and secondary and at college level. So I've been in education for that period of time as a PSHE lead, involved with the authority. And about 8 years ago, with colleagues, we looked at some data within BANES around particularly boys with their mental health, and there was a spate of a few suicides in schools, and we actually started looking into the data about boys in general. So when we talk about Boys in Mind, and I do say this, the work we do is for everyone, but we target boys and young men in particular because of the data. So we're very much about supporting about positive mental health. And you can see on that first page, it's about prevent. We're trying to actually get in early, and as Alice pointed this earlier, if we can create conversations earlier, promote positive mental health, and actually work with organisations and work with young people. So if you could move along, please, Elaine, because I'm not in control of the slides. So really, why we do it, a bit of stats. I know Alice talked about it earlier, but it's more common in men than women. Suicide is a leading cause of death for under 35s, and as pointed out, 1 in 5 young people have mental health conditions. And this is the same stat Alice had: over 200 teenagers lost to suicide each year. Again, this is data. This is for us. This isn't something I would actually share with in a school setting or with the young people. It's just really giving us an understanding of why it's really important that we actually start having these conversations and start talking really about positive mental health. Thank you, Elaine. Again, particularly around the Bath, this is why I'm a Bath based, that we looked at it particularly because it has the highest suicide rate in the Southwest. And when I started Boys and Mind about 8 years ago, it was probably the highest in the country. So it's really important that actually, even though you think it's not the area you're in, it might not be, it's there. So we've really just got to just really be aware that actually mental health is a real serious issue. Thank you. I'm just very aware of time as well today, guys. I don't want to bombard you with too many stats, but really, and the reason why we focus with Boys to Men, because even 2026, men don't feel as comfortable talking about their mental health, emotions and feelings. And I still hear things like man up and holding it all in, bottling up. So it's really important we just keep breaking down that stigma around for men to be able to, and boys to have those conversations and to actually start discussing how they feel. So these are the reasons why. And this is, I won't go through the whole thing, but there's lots of things that contributes to poor well-being in people. And it's academic, family, circumstances, bereavement, relationships, all this stigma around. So there's not just one thing. There's a series of things, which I won't go into details, but as in practitioners in school, you'll know this in general anyway. Yeah. But what the work we do, what we've worked in schools works, and we work primary, secondary, and college. And as Alice pointed out, and Beth said as well, at primary level, it's very much about well-being. It's very much about positive well-being and what makes us feel good. Second, we start going not into suicide so much. We touch on it, we talk about it. It's a bit more. We start saying that aspects of anxiety. So it's, as you said, it's age appropriate and it's through the stages. But what we found is that if we can work within school and help them with the knowledge, it helps. Physical activities, I'm going to talk a minute about some of the programs we're on. It's about supporting mental health and well-being. And what we do is we particularly target getting young people to actually help seek in themselves and their own tools for themselves. It's not just being said, right, this is what you can do. It's thinking about what they can do to help themselves and their friends and their communities. Thank you. Who we are, quickly go through. We had 3 Ps. It's very much about, it's getting conversations. It's challenging stereotypes. It's breaking down those stigmas. And what we're very much is trying to empower boys and young men and young people in general to talk about their emotions. And we very much focus on a sort of solution-focused way. So it's very much promoting positive images of young men and boys, particularly in the last few years with social media, how there's a real negative aspect of men and boys. So it's really about being positive. Thank you. Our team's very much made of, I've been in education for years. One of our other colleagues is an ex-ed teacher. So there's very much an experience of teaching within our team. We've got professional filmmakers, and we actually work with lots of people who have lived experience. And so within all that, we were able to actually develop our programs. Thank you. We use particularly early support, and at the end I'll say about our website, there's all the resources there are for free to use. But it was very much about, we use films. Films are a really good way of actually a medium we found. Not only when we make the films that we have fantastic conversations, but it's really powerful to see young people talking about mental health. So it's very much about, we're not talking about our mentoring programs, but we very much look with communities, getting young people to be part of something else, and actually it's just being able to use it. And it could be, when I say digital storytelling, we use podcasts, or it could be the films. We use different mentoring projects with schools. Some schools we use in the Bath area, where we have one with football, which I'll talk about, boxing, gardening, gym. We're thinking about using art and music as another one for next year. But it's very much about small groups, and actually being able to actually just to start those conversations or give young people the tools to have those conversations. Thank you. I know I'm rushing through this a bit, guys, but it's very much, I just kind of gives you a flavour of what we do. Early intervention is very much, so for example, it's that awareness. We then come in, we do workshops, assemblies, we run festivals, but then with the intensive sport, we use community projects. So for example, these are just some of the quotes, some of the boys that they've noticed after being in the session. It could be that they're finding a sense of working with other people. They're having less detention as a school, it says there. But it's being more focused as well, but just focused with themselves and actually being able to actually engage with other people. Thank you. That's just a bit of the sort of things, the snapshot of our reach, which is pretty impressive. I think quite impressive for a very small charity based around Bath. But it's actually it's about those peer relationships, and it's about those ways that they can talk with their friends in a safe way. So I'm going to skip on to the next one. I'll just show you some of the programs we run. So for example, this is a Boxing in Mind we started last year, year 9 to 11. It's very much a sort of, we've structured this for sometimes just get rid of some of that aggression, some of that frustration. And it's a really good way that they've been part of this gym, learned some skills, really good about how they see themselves. And actually what I've noticed with the boxing, we had a session last week, that the boys are actually coaching each other and helping each other and supporting each other. And I just think that's a fantastic way. And these are boys that have never really actually know each other, but they come as a group. And the one next to it is a football. And we do with another local team. And again, it's that light touch kind of mentoring. It's being part of the club. And what we've done with the lads there, that they have a free season ticket, they get involved with the community, they might help out with jobs. It's not just the football, but it's actually that confidence. And that's that being able to then talk about when things aren't good and actually how they feel. The next one, please, Elaine. The Grow for Life is we work for another charity just outside Bath, and it's a different thing though. It's therapeutic gardening. It's a space where you're not in school. It's outside, in touch with nature. It's about teamwork. There's actually sometimes just stopping and noticing. And what we find with these programs, you can have better conversations when you're doing something. You know, the old adage, they said, whether you're going for a walk with somebody, you can talk, or if you're driving a car. But what we found with this, while we're doing this work, we can have those conversations, or actually not. And sometimes it's just actually being outside doing something different. But what it does do, what we found from all the boys we've taken out, is that they're more confident about talking about how they feel. They might not know why, but they actually want to start talking about it. But what they do, they feel part of something. And the one on the end is we started in a local gym in Bath. Again, it's light touch mentoring. It's being outside in a different environment and actually very much having really positive role models, male role models, which we think is really important, particularly for young boys. Thank you. One thing I really I'm pleased about is the fact that our filmmaking. There's a range of films on our website, from primary to secondary to community. And one film which we won the award was my son's film. So I've got a very much personal lived experience with that. But it's very much trying to be positive. It's trying to actually talk about actually how we can, the effects of mental health. There's another one about remembering Henry. So we've got some memorial things where from the family who've lost somebody. But again, that would be age appropriate. But there's a jigsaw film, an animated film, which is just for primary, which is used the way of actually what you can do to help yourself with your well-being. So what do you find joyful? Who do you include? What do you give back? Sleep, active, and those wow moments. So it's all about promoting a healthy sense of well-being. So again, all these films are on our website. They're free to use. Have a look. Please use them. Again, but just be aware that some of them, the secondary ones, do mention suicide, but we try and actually talk about it in a positive way and actually how we can actually just share stories. Thank you. And that's why I think we're doing what we're doing, because we've got education, got an expertise, lived experience of the team. We're trying to get as much as youth led. So I'm at the moment process of trying to developing youth ambassadors in schools, and I really want young people to be taking the lead, to be making more films, making more podcasts, finding out what works well in their school or in their community, and actually just that light touch sort of mentoring approach, but it's creating that sort of environment to listen. We all sometimes need to listen more, and it's about building a healthy society. So it's really about, it ties in with education, it links with healthcare, community, and just from a couple of quotes from some of the young people on our project. So it just might be useful for some of the in schools if you want to use our films, because sometimes seeing young people talking about that has got more power, really. So that will be. I'll stop there because the next few slides is just how you can support us. But I think Beth might add on our email. But please go to the website. Please use some of the any of the resources. And thank you for listening. It's been a fantastic webinar just for me. I've always think I'm learning more when we do these webinars. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I know we have got some of Jim's Boys in Mind web videos embedded throughout the secondary scheme. We don't have none of the ones that are specifically look at suicide are in there, just for your awareness, but we do have those that are surrounding mental well-being in particular embedded throughout. And we did also a few years ago do a Mental Health Awareness Week assembly, which I think it's still on the portal, which utilised that jigsaw video Jim was talking about. I mean, it lended itself very well to us because it was jigsaw. I think that was just luck a little bit going our way there, but that is on there still, I think, for primary and secondary schools to utilise should they like to as well. There's no it has to, even though it was created a few years ago, there isn't a shelf life to that necessarily. And we will, of course, Jim, be sharing some of the materials in our follow-up email after today's webinar as well, so we can showcase particularly some of those videos you were talking about. But what I really like about Jim or Boys in Mind's approach is that the young people's voices are literally, it screams it. If you look at their website, I know we've done webinars in the past, Jim, where you've invited young people to come on the webinar. We did one which was looking at what it means to be a boy. And that was really powerful, hearing from young people. And I think we forget sometimes, don't we, particularly when we're delivering from such an adult perspective, how important it is that we're bringing young people's voices through, which Jim does amazingly at Boys in Mind. So that does bring us to a close. I know I said at the beginning, if you had any questions, please bring them forward. I don't think, Eleni, we have any so far. But if you do have any following after today's webinar, please do get in touch with us at Jigsaw, and we're more than happy to answer any of those or support you with this particular area. And a big thank you to Alice as well today for sharing her experience with us. I know, Eleanor, you watched Alice deliver a previous conference. So I'm really great that we managed to make contact with you and utilise your experience, Alice. Thank you.
No, I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks very much for joining online as well, or for watching the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.